apply, and whereas fine, I don't want to say punishment, but we consider fine to be more of a punishment.
And so where do those fines come in terms of on page 74? Where would the fines be?
So on page 74, those are expenditures, not revenue. So fines are considered revenue. So if you get charged something, it's part of revenue. So 74 reflects what the agency is spending, not what it is receiving. Yeah.
So it would be in then with the, it would be in with the fee section, correct? I mean, I'm assuming it's going to be in the same category as fees.
Right, it's also
Income.
revenue. Yeah, it's a different, exactly.
Right.
A different form of income, a different form of revenue, fines, fees, similar.
Okay, thanks.
Committee, we're ready for a motion.
Okay. I'll make a motion to pass out the Kansas Department of Health and Environment Division Environment budget. Believe it or not, it's the environment budget of KDH&E favorable.
Seconded by Baker. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Do we want to, the ayes appear to have it. Do you want to actual recorded vote? Okay. So those who are in favor of the budget, raise your hands. I know it. Opposed? What was it? You get it, Victoria? 5-2. With that, we'll consider the budget passes, and we're going to close the hearing on KDHE. And for those who know, next Wednesday, Mr. Henning will be here for another bill and for something else. So you'll see him again next week. Okay. Next on the agenda is we're going to work the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism budget. Are there any amendments? I have one. Victoria, can you hand it out, or can they get a grip on it? Or Victoria, I'm just going to have you. I know. Anyway, Victoria, I'm going to have you just read this.
Okay. Do you want me to read it word for word or just explain it? Okay. Wait, okay, I'll just read it. Okay, during the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021, in addition to the other purposes for which expenditures may be made by the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism from monies appropriated from the Wildlife Fee Fund of the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism for fiscal year 2021 by Chapter 5 of the 2020 Session Laws of Kansas, this or other Appropriations Act of the 2021 regular session of the Legislature, expenditures shall be made by the above agency from such monies to reimburse Tim Nadeau, sorry if I said that wrong, located at 416 South Carbon, Scranton, Kansas, 66537, for the purchase of deer antlers sold at auction on January 2nd, 2020, and to issue a salvage tag to Tim Nadeau for such deer antlers, provided that expenditures for such reimbursement shall be $16,001.
Comments? Second? Yep. Representative Garber, second. Comments?
They know the background on this issue. I don't know if you want to explain it or the secretary wants to explain this situation.
This, well, probably both. Mr. Secretary, would you like to have the first comment? Mr. Lovelace? Okay. So I'll just give you a little brief history. This has been going on. Go ahead. This has been going on for several years. This all started back, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. There was a court proceeding in Osage County referencing the Tim Nadeau, the person who illegally shot the deer, made his statement. It was all kind of said that day. There was nobody there from Wildlife and Parks at that situation. And it's been going on, and this comes down, and I know there will be other comments, but about a year ago in January, there was an auction in Senator Hensley's office. There was Representative Dietrich, myself, Senator Hensley, Tim Nadeau, and a guy on a speakerphone that was we were told he was from Bass Pro Shop. So we had an auction of 2 people for state property, or however you want to do it. And we have, the legislature over the years have passed legislation trying to give landowners the option for these antlers. This is in my situation, this could have been turned into a great deal for Kansas, promoting deer, large deer, good hunting things to do. It wasn't done that way, and it's just whatever it is. So I'm sure there's several sides to this story, but I was at the auction, and I just thought it was not the way that the state should proceed in trying to get rid of property. So needless to say, well, when this is all, if anybody has anything they want to say, they can, and that's just where we're at.
I guess, Mr. Chairman, I have, I guess, a couple questions. What did Mr. Nadeau receive via the auction? They purchased.
Mr. Nadeau received.
How much did he receive? Any money compensation?
At the hearing in the court, I believe for the trespass and whatever, and I may be fuzzy on this, but I think the judge awarded him $8,000 back several years ago. But at the auction, he wrote a check for $16,001. So that's all I know for dollars on that. But
Okay.
the judge didn't award him that. I mean, he had reasons why he did that.
I understand. I had forgotten the amount of money, and now you're pointing out it was $16,001. So we're reimbursing him basically, and I guess my question don't we have claims against the state? Would that not go there if he had a claim against the state, or has he exhausted or tried that avenue?
Representative Hawkins?
Thank you. That's a great question, and actually it has been to claims against the state. This is one of those issues that have been around forever since I've been here. Actually, it happened I believe either the year before I came or the year I came into the legislature. And we have tried over and over and over in the House to remedy this situation with no avail. I mean, every time we do something, the Senate won't take it up or whatever happens, but it doesn't get taken care of. The Secretary of the Department of Wildlife and Parks blocked, not from this administration, from the last administration, blocked every attempt to do anything also. It gets very frustrating after a while when we're trying to get something done to rectify a wrong and we can't get it done. And quite frankly, I believe this year, this is the place to rectify the problem finally.
Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate that, Majority Leader, that explanation. And it probably is time to rectify it. I don't have a problem with that. I guess I do have a problem with rectifying one issue and we don't rectify other issues. For example, and I don't want to go back and get into the lady, Representative Alcala can speak to that one. And if we're gonna rectify these situations, you know, I have no problem rectifying this one if we rectify the other one. So just my comments, Majority Leader.
Representative Hawkins.
And maybe it should be Representative Alcala that talks about this, but I believe, Representative Alcala, didn't we pass something out of the House for that lady in prior years, and then it gets to the Senate and nothing happens?
It was asset forfeiture, and we ended up passing it unanimously, or with 80-some votes, I think that's what it was. It was something that was taken from her almost like 25 years ago. A judge had ruled that the money be returned by the state. It never did. We're talking about somebody that had like an 8th grade education, very limited in finding resources to try to recover that fund. And so we didn't give her the full amount. It was 23,000 was the full amount. We gave her 12,000. But there was a court order. It just never got followed through. And I don't remember what happened in the Senate. Oh, I do. Yeah, no, it passed the Senate. At that time, Coyer pulled it and vetoed it, said that she wasn't worthy of receiving it because she had a criminal history in her teens. This lady was like in her 80s when she was trying to recover it. And when Governor Kelly came back into office, I don't know how she reversed what he did or what, but they didn't pay her the full amount, but they gave her 12,000.
Representative
And I appreciate, again, the Majority Leader and Representative Alcala. If I remember correctly, I think part of the problem, the Highway Patrol didn't want to reimburse her, if I remember the original.
I didn't want to talk bad about him, so I didn't bring that up.
Well, it just seems to me, maybe we take 12,000 out of KHP, whoever's budget's working, Highway Patrol's budget, and let's right these wrongs, both here and for her. Just a thought.
Oh, Representative Alcala.
Getting old, man. I'm sitting up here looking at you. Hey, thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Gardner, you bring up a good point. That 12,000 did come out of the Kansas Highway Patrol budget.
But it was short.
Representative Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, this is a great conversation. I sit on the tax committee with some of you guys. This same conversation may be transferred over there. I noted your comments. The 16,000 is nothing compared to what we've done, what we owe people in tax committee. So I'm not sure we're setting a precedent here. If we start awarding money that we think we owe and stuff, that's all great. But my goodness, when we come to tax, we owe like $300 or $400 million just right off the top of our heads to different consumers and individuals. I'm not sure we want to go down that slope right now, but whatever the committee wants to do.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Hahn.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to be on the record in saying that I 100% believe that landowners' rights should always trump government agencies' rights to real property on their land. That's all my comments.
Any more comments? We'll just, we've had a motion. Are we, Victoria, ready for vote? So, yeah, Randy, or Garber, Seneca. Those in favor of passing this, raise your hand. Opposed? I'll go with the yeas. Okay, so Victoria, 5 yeas and 4 nays? Okay, the chair broke the tie with his vote. Thank you. Next, is there any more amendments on the Wildlife and Parks budget? Representative Garber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have an amendment, but I do want to make a comment of something that was said previously. I appreciate the people who work for the state, but I also understand that it's the citizens who pay their salaries. And I am here to represent my citizens as well as those who work there, and I try to work in between the two to get what's best for everybody. But I think our citizens have been through quite an ordeal here the last several months. In fact, years from when, as long as I've been here, I see them having to pay more and more fees and taxes and license fees and fines, if you will. And sometime there's going to have to be a stop put to it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I have one more amendment, and basically it kind of goes like this. And Victoria, if I get out of script on this, give me a knock. But on July 1, 2021, $100,000 for agritourism by reducing the transfer to SGF by $100,000. And basically, this is for this. I've kind of watched this over the years, and the department doesn't, in my opinion, have the best interest sometimes of some of our farmers and ranchers. So by sending this $100,000 to agritourism, and they work a lot with farmers, but basically this is kind of the purpose for educating the farmers and ranchers about leasing and hunting and other agritourism possibilities to assist in diversifying their farm and ranch operations with agritourism businesses. This state has got, I think, I'm doing another bill, but it was something like 43 million acres and, I don't know, several hundred farms and ranches. And they're scattered all over the state. And they are just sitting there for commerce, whether it's pumpkin patches, weddings, raising other critters or berries or whatever. And the deer thing's a big thing, but that's something they'll have to work out. We'll figure out a way on that. But anybody that we can get here to Kansas to spend a day, spend a night, go to a motel, eat a meal out, these farmers and ranchers are already set up. And not everybody will want to. And I'm going to request that the agritourism, if this passes, return here the first part of February 22 and give us an update on some of the things that they've got done. And I'm just trying to find some way of giving that group of people a little leg up or arm up. So it's just open for discussion. Yes, and follow tourism wherever it actually ends up. We kind of know where it's going, but that's just a follow-up for whatever. Any comments? Representative Carlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to see if I understand you. If tourism moves to commerce, there will be money following it, like 4 million. So you want to just add to commerce, well, to tourism, wherever it is.
No, to agritourism.
But it would,
It is in tourism, but what happens in tourism, it's so huge. That some, and if you all don't think this can be earmarked, that's where I'd like it to go, because that's the group of people that get boots on the ground and try to get out in the rural areas to do something.
let me try to finish my question.
sorry.
I'm sorry, because I don't I want to support your idea. I just want to know what you want to do with it. So you want to leave it in wildlife and parks for ag tourism, or you want to send it to tourism for ag tourism?
We're going to send it to tourism wherever tourism decides to end up.
Okay, and to follow up, the Kansas magazine, that comes out of tourism. And that is a good way to help to promote the kind of ideas you have. And so it's for things like that, or working more like Extension does directly with farms, or?
I foresee this. I mean, I work with agritourism in whatever I do. I mean, they're a great.
Real job?
Real job. And it's just like, there's a guy down by Big Springs. He started a berry farm, and then he got bigger, and he does a great job, sells all of his berries, and now he wants to we passed a bill so they could he could sell wines and jellies. And the trouble with small business is nobody knows when you start out just how big you might actually get to be. The problem with state government and local government and county government is when somebody has a dream to be a business, you got to give it a chance to grow or fail. You can't just regulate it to death before it gets a chance to bloom. And it's not much. It is a lot of money, but when you divide it by the number of farms, it's not much. But if they can get through the state and try to promote some of this stuff, we can give them a chance, and it's to the will of the committee. I'm just trying to find a way to seed some rural development. Representative Gardner.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Let's see, you want to move 100,000 out of wildlife and parks,
Nope.
Add 100,000 to tourism, correct?
Yeah, but
Wherever it goes.
yeah, but it's not coming out of wildlife and parks, right, Victoria?
Where's it coming out of, Victoria?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if I understood the motion correctly, it's coming from EDIF. So, but the EDIF doesn't have an adequate ending balance for 100,000, but there is a transfer from EDIF to State General Fund every year. In fiscal year 2022, it's 16.4 million. So we would reduce that by 250,000, giving EDIF an adequate ending balance to cover this motion. Or 100,000, I am so sorry, 100,000.
Okay, that's where I was confused. It's really coming out of EDIF. And so, Mr. Chairman, just a follow-up question. Have you talked to Lieutenant Governor Dave Tolan about agritourism and what needs to be done, and share your thoughts with the Commerce Department on how they could maybe expand and get involved, and what you see is a possible expansion of their job?
A little bit. I've talked to him when he was in my office. On this transfer, there's only 12 employees going from, and I think tourism in the umbrella is so huge. You know what I'm saying? I'd be glad to do whatever you want, Representative. I just trying to maybe try to get some economic development going here in the rural area of Kansas. So I've talked to people over there, not lately, but I've talked to people in the ag sector, and if you don't kind of earmark it, a lot of times, sometimes the little rural farmer and rancher projects don't seem to get going, but I think if they would want to try it, that's fine. If you think this is throwing money in the spot, I mean, this is just, it's to talk about.
No, Mr. Chairman, I think it's a good idea. I'm not saying that. I'm just wanting to make sure that instead of just throwing money and moving money over, that we have a plan initially. But I don't, it's coming out of EDIF. God bless you. Good luck in appropriations.
I sat very far at the back. Representative Hawkins?
EDIF, what is it?
That's my question.
What's EDIF?
Victoria, it's the Economic Development Initiative Fund, which comes out of the, what's it called? The gaming.
Gaming and racing, is that what you're trying to
Yeah,
say?
gaming and racing. And there's about $42 million that is appropriated for different economic development projects. That's what it was supposed to do originally when it was first developed. The money goes to all kinds of different things anymore. And we normally have, and some of it goes to the water fund, some of it goes to wildlife and parks, some money goes to Commerce Department, but there's normally some leftover money at the end of the year, and that's swept into SGF. 11, 12 million, Victoria, last year. Was it 16? It seems to me, after I spent quite a bit of it last year, or tried to, but 16 million, so that's just swept. So it's money there that we can allocate for various things like this.
Representative Hahn?
So thank you for that explanation. So then that money, so we're not adding to this budget, we're just reallocating. That's correct? And I wanted to comment a little bit on what Randy had said. This committee has given me heartburn because I just feel like there's commas and zeros every day, and we just send these budgets through, and I'm not having some due diligence, and maybe it's just because I'm new and I'm not as versed on some of these programs and acronyms, but it's not that I'm against these government employees either, or their credentials, those that are qualified. We need to pay people that are qualified so we don't lose them to the private sector. It's just based on where our state has been, and it's been closed, and COVID has hit so many small businesses so hard. I feel like it's not a time for government to just rubber stamp some of these budgets that go through. And so I just wanted to put that out there, that I'm not trying to be difficult with these budgets, just be a good steward with our constituents' money. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Carlin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative, I was new once, been a while, and it is a lot to learn. It is not expected that you learn it all in 1 year. But the governor did offer up a 10% cut. She asked all the agencies, education and all, to prepare for a 10% cut. In her budget, I'm not sure I can say blanket, but I think most of it is a 5% cut that she actually took by the time she got around to doing her budget. And a good document for you to read would be the governor's budget report, which can be provided to you. So you can go through all the agencies and see what they've had. But what you don't see with that is what happened in 2010 when we started cutting everything. And when we passed the tax bill in 2012, when we had to cut $500 million every year out of the budget for several years. So agriculture, for example, was operating at the 1906 level. And commerce and agriculture were down to zero. So when you see increases now, it's because we rectified the tax problem, we repealed the egregiousness of that tax bill, and we've come forward. And in the last few years, we've been able to put in, since 18, we passed a bill in 17, and so since 18, we've had a little bit more money, and we've been able to increase these budgets. But if you just look at today, you don't see that. But they're so far behind what a normal operation would be in all these agencies. And I haven't talked to agency leaders to ask them if they feel they're going to ever catch up, but they've operated at such tremendous cuts since 2010. So if you go back to 1906 and come forward, you'll see all kinds of stuff like that. And we went through I came in after the 01-2 recession, and then I've been here for 08 and 09 recession, and then the big tax cuts. And those things are really difficult for our agencies to get through. And we are adding money now as we can, and prudently add, because some of these things have suffered so bad. The other thing on the fees, most of the fees have come in at the request of associations that people belong to. Architects, engineers, fertilizer companies, they come in and they have members that are farmers and operators, but they're associations that they pay dues to want to increase the fees so they can get more service from the state. The fees are used to serve them in their niche in what they are paying fees to. So it is a long process, and I hope that you will sit down with agencies from after this budget season is over and really learn more about what they're doing and ask them those hard questions. You can do that, but right now we have a process. And all we really do is decide whether to give them a little more for worthy programs or not, basically, based on the governor's work and all the agencies' work to prepare their budgets to bring to us. We're not the first people to see it. So just hopefully that helps, and I'm glad to have your questions. And I think your questions are not inappropriate. It's just that there's been so many people look at the budgets by now.
Representative Hahn.
I just wanted to follow up with remarks. Thank you so much for sharing your heart from a perspective of you used to be new once, and I can appreciate those because it's a lot. I guess from my perspective and what I've been struggling with in the last couple weeks here is that our entire state runs off farming and ranching. In my district, it's pretty much primarily farming and ranching, oil and gas. And when I look around and know that my neighbors are exclusively making their living off of production agriculture, and since 2015, ranchers, for instance, have lost half the value of their calves, they're not looking at these budgets going, well, I guess we might cut when we can. And so I'm just trying to view it through the lens that we view our own family small business through, ranch through, that our neighbors are as well, and go, yeah, in a perfect world, this would be great, but how can we, it's just, everything is so tight right now. So I'm just trying to work through this process, and again, I appreciate your kind sentiments to me, and those are my final remarks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Gardner.
Mr. Chairman, where are we on this amendment? I'll second it, if it hadn't been seconded. Victoria? Had it been seconded? Okay. I think call the question. Let's move this thing.
Question. So we'll say it like this. We do the amendment, then do the budget, right? So I move my amendment, and All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Amendment passes. Does anyone else have anything they want to say about the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks budget today?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion to move out favorably the Kansas Wildlife and Parks budget as amended, 2021, 2022.
Seconded by Representative Newland. All in favor say aye. Opposed? One nay. Next on the agenda, we're going to do the Kansas Corporation Commission. Does anybody have any motion and any motions or amendments for the KCC? Oh, Representative Carlin.
To get us rolling, I will just move that we pass the KCC budget out favorably, and now we have discussion.
Any discussion? We need a second. Good. So, Newland, okay. Apparently, there any discussion? So then I make a motion that we pass out the KCC budget as amended, and all those in favor say aye. No. As amended? Go ahead. There was no amendments. Sorry. So, go ahead. Did you want to?
Yes, I'll just move my motion.
Those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Next on the agenda, we're going to have a hearing on the Kansas Water Office budget, and Victoria is going to fill us in.
The Water Office starts on page 667. 667. So on page 667, as you're now used to seeing, is an agency description. We'll just move straight to the budget on page 674. 674. On page 674, I'm looking underneath the box. The agency estimates revised 2021 expenditures of $12.7 million, including $1 million state general funds. This is an all funds decrease of $975,000 and an SGF decrease of $1,500 below the 2021 approved amount. So that all funds decrease of $975,000 is primarily due to the agency building in the governor's proposed allotment plan. So over the summer, similar to the Department of Agriculture, the governor requested that the agency spend $1.2 million less from the state water plan fund than they were originally approved for. The agency did build that into their revised estimate. So of that $975,000 decrease, most of that is caused by building in that allotment plan. And that is set off a little bit by state water plan fund reappropriations. So we've talked about those before. Unspent money from 2020 rolls into 2021. So that's why the whole decrease isn't 1.2 million. So you can see a description of most of those decreases in a couple of categories. The first is contractual services, which is on page 674. That next to last sentence, the all funds decrease is due to decreased expenditures on water injection dredging and dewatering projects, which were part of the allotment plan. Moving on to page 675. Under other assistance, you can see the last part of the allotment plan for watershed conservation practices. And again, it touches on reappropriations from the state water plan fund. So on page 675, the governor recommends 2021 expenditures of $12.7 million, including $1 million state general fund. This is an increase of $1,500, all state general fund, above the agency's revised estimate. And this is just because when the agency submitted its budget, it inadvertently left out $1,500, so the governor's fixing that technical mistake for them, so it's not really adding money. It should have been in their revised estimate, but they just accidentally left it out. Mr. Chairman, I'll just go ahead and go on to fiscal year 2022. Fiscal year 2022 is on page 676. On page 676, looking underneath the box, the agency requests 2022 expenditures of $15 million, including $1 million state general fund. This is an all funds increase of $2.4 million and a state general fund increase of almost $7,600 above the 2021 revised estimate. That state general fund increase of about $7,600 is mostly due to increased contributions to group health insurance and CAPERS. And that all funds increase is primarily due to the agency's enhancement requests, so we'll just go ahead and move to those that are on page 677. On page 677, looking underneath the box for the agency's enhancement requests, they requested 5, totaling $2.3 million, all from the State Water Plan Fund. These enhancements include $200,000 for flood-related studies, $100,000 for water technology farms, $500,000 for watershed conservation practices, $150,000 for a study of the Arbuckle Formation, and on the back, page 678, $1.4 million for water injection dredging at Tuttle Creek. That's again on page 678. The Kansas Water Authority also requests that the full transfers to the State Water Plan Fund be made. So we've talked about on several occasions that there should be a statutory transfer of $6 million from the State General Fund to the State Water Plan Fund. And there should be $2 million from the Economic Development Initiatives Fund to the State Water Plan Fund for a total of $8 million. But those full transfers have not been made since 2008. So the Water Authority and the Water Office asked that those be reinstated to their full transfer amount. So still on page 678, the governor recommends $660,000 in enhancement requests. The governor did recommend $200,000 for flood-related studies, $100,000 for water technology farms, and $360,000 for watershed conservation practices. And finally, on page 678, we'll look at the agency's reduced resources package. As we've talked about on several occasions, agencies receiving state general fund were asked to propose a 10% cut to their state general fund expenditures. The water offices totals $102,000 from state general fund. And in order to accomplish this, the agency would hold open 1.5 FTE positions, and that's a water resource planner position. And the governor did recommend that reduced resources package. So that is included in the agency's governor's recommendation of 10% reduction. And Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for questions on the water office's budget.
Any questions for Victoria? Thank you, Victoria. Next, Matt, Matt, is Matt going to WebEx? And then we have Kara and Connie here in person for their presentation. So,
Chairman Corbett and members of the committee, my name is Connie Owen, and I'm the director of the Kansas Water Office. Thank you for allowing us the opportunity to present on our budget today. I believe that we have provided our budget overview and the Kansas Water Authority's annual report. What my conversation with you will be tracking will be the slides that you see on the screen, and I believe you also have access to those. The Kansas Water Office was created in 1981 to be the primary planning, coordination, and implementation office for the state of Kansas to identify current and future needs regarding water and to identify programs to address those needs, a rather broad charge. To finance this, in 1989, the legislature created the State Water Plan Fund. So there is a general plan that the Kansas Water Office is in charge of creating to identify these needs and projects for all things water across the state. To fund the projects from this plan, the State Water Plan Fund was created. We'll talk about that a little bit more as we move on. But the creation of this plan is the primary charge of the Kansas Water Office. Next slide. For budgeting purposes, the office is divided into two primary programs. You'll see 4 boxes up there. Those 3 are under one program, the Water Authority, Water Planning, and Drought Monitoring. And Public Water Supply is our second primary program. The Kansas Water Authority is an advisory board that helps identify and prioritize the needs for the State Water Plan Fund. The water planning component is the State Water Plan development and implementation. That's the Water Office is in charge of that particular role, so we try to implement the things that are within that state water plan. That is our primary charge. We work together with the Water Authority, the Advisory Board, and the Regional Advisory Committees. I'll talk about those in just a moment. The third component is drought monitoring. We're also in charge of the drought response team for the state. So those 3 components are within our water planning and implementation program. The public water supply program is very different from that. That is a basically reservoir operations program. It serves in the nature of a water utility for many citizens in the state, where we contract with the federal government for storage in the federal reservoirs, and then in turn, we contract with municipalities and industries who need that water out of those reservoirs. Next slide. So those were our 2 primary programs. So where does the money come from? We have 3 primary sources of revenue. The State General Fund is one source that funds our office operations and nearly half of our staff. It also funds the expenses of the Kansas Water Authority. The other source are user fees from the Public Water Supply Program. And as I mentioned, we contract with the federal government for storage space in the reservoirs, and then in turn, we contract with municipalities and industries and other users in the state who need the water from those reservoirs. So they pay into the water office for the use of that water, and then we in turn pay for the storage space in the reservoirs. The State Water Plan Fund is what I mentioned before. It's the money to pay to implement the programs identified in the water plan. The things that, the money that flows into the State Water Plan Fund are comprised of fees, which were similar to what you were discussing earlier, and they're particular user fees that are paid by statute, and the statutory demand transfers. And that's something that is something I'd like to draw your attention to, and Victoria mentioned this as well. By statute, the State General Fund is to transfer $6 million a year into the State Water Plan Fund. And the Economic Development Initiatives Fund, which was discussed earlier, is to deposit $2 million into the State Water Plan Fund each year. It has been a long time since those entire transfers have been made, since 2008. And if one was to add up the amount in which we are in arrears, it would be about $80 million. So on to the next slide. This is, there is a bar graph to give you a bit of a visual on our expenditures by fund. So what I'd like to draw your attention to is the blue at the bottom of those bar graphs represents the State General Fund. That pays for, as I said, the office operations and for about half of our staff. The green is the Public Water Supply Fund. or the public water supply revenue, which comes in from contracts for use out of the reservoirs. The orange is the state water plan fund. And what I would describe about that is the water plan fund can be confusing at times. It is an independent fund administered by the Kansas Water Office, but the programs that are paid for out of that fund are actually implemented by 4 different agencies. So the Department of Agriculture, the Department of Health and Environment, the Kansas Water Office, and at times the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism implement programs paid for by the State Water Plan Fund. To the right of that, you'll see a breakdown of the 2 primary programs I mentioned, the Water Planning and Implementation Program and the Public Water Supply Program. And those depict our expenditures out of those for those 2 program areas. Next slide. As Victoria was mentioning, we were requested, as were many agencies across the state, to implement a 10% reduction. This organizational chart is a depiction of our staff. We are a rather small agency. You see 20 positions there. 4 of them are currently vacant. And in order to implement the 10% reduction in state general fund, we are planning, and it is in the recommendations already, to leave 1.5 of those positions vacant. Next slide. Earlier I mentioned the Kansas Water Authority, which is an advisory board. So if we think back to those 2 primary programs, we have the Water Planning and Implementation Program and the Water Supply Program. The Water Planning and Implementation Program has 3 components to it, if you remember those 4 boxes. One is the Kansas Water Authority. This is kind of an interesting feature of our agency. This is an advisory board. By statute, it is part of and within the Kansas Water Office, but these are not employees of our office. These are appointees. They are a total of 24 people. 13 of them are voting members, and that's what you see on this map right here. It shows you the current members of the Water Authority. 11 of them are appointed by the governor. The chair, which is currently undergoing the confirmation process, is the one position that is serving at the pleasure of the governor, but subject to Senate confirmation. There are also 2 positions that are appointed from legislative leadership. One is appointed by the President of the Senate and one by the Speaker of the House. Of the 11 positions appointed by the governor by statute, as you'll see on the map, they are required to represent different stakeholders. There is an attempt to keep it geographically balanced throughout the state, and the stakeholders that they must represent are as varied as the groundwater management districts and watershed districts, conservation districts, and small and large municipalities. I mentioned that this advisory board is made up of 24 people. The other component of this advisory board are ex officio members. They're not voting members. They are the directors and heads of our various state agencies that are involved with water. Next slide. The second of those 4 boxes that we first looked at, the water planning and implementation component, as I mentioned, the Kansas Water Office's main charge is to develop the state water plan, to identify our needs, what do we need to do, what are our problems, and how are we going to address them. The 3 main topics that encompasses are declining groundwater, primarily our Ogallala Aquifer, is in decline and continues to be in decline and is an incredibly serious problem for central and western Kansas. The second main category is reservoir sedimentation. So what does that mean? That means these federal reservoirs that 2/3 of our people rely on are filling in with sediment, which is a natural occurrence, but it builds up over time. And that sediment takes up space in the reservoir, so you can store less and less water. So this becomes a very serious problem for the municipalities and industries and users that rely on the water in the reservoirs. It also has very serious implications for flood control, because then there's less room for flood waters to be stored. And it has serious implications for drought occurrences, because there's less opportunity to store for a drought when those occur. The third main issue area are water quality concerns, and those affect both groundwater and surface water throughout the state. So how do we address those? What does that process look like? It starts at the ground level. It starts with local regional advisory committees. And what you'll see on this slide, the state of Kansas with all those little squiggly lines, those are 14 different watershed districts throughout the state. Each one of those has a regional advisory committee made up of local people who are living and breathing and understanding and knowledgeable about the water issues in their area. And this is part of our statutory charge. This isn't something we do because it's a good idea. This is an integral part of what we do. So these regional advisory committees get together. They work with Kansas Water Office staff to help provide information and facilitate their meetings. And they bring their concerns and projects they want to see to the Water Authority, that advisory board. So it feeds from the ground up. And then the Water Authority, in turn, meets and comes up with, they consider these local recommendations. They also consider recommendations of all those state agencies I mentioned. Finally, when they've sorted through all that, they come up with their recommendation for how to spend the State Water Plan Fund. So that impacts then, as I said, 4 different state agencies, because they're all involved in implementing those programs. The next slide, just as a quick glance at this, what I would draw your attention to, this reflects the State Water Plan Fund total revenue since 1991. And that big purple chunk is the State General Fund demand transfer into the Water Plan Fund. As you can see from that great big spike, 2008 was the last time it was fully funded. And the green chunk above that represents the transfer from the Economic Development Initiatives Fund. And I think it's pretty easy to see that in the most recent years, that has diminished dramatically. Now, I do need to give a very big shout out and thank you to the legislature for last year, because a year ago, you restored the State General Fund transfer and improved the Economic Development Initiatives Fund transfer, but unfortunately, COVID took it away. So we have to say thank you, and hopefully you will be of the same mind. And again, as with everything you do, I'm sure I don't have to tell you there's never enough money to go around. So the prioritization process is what really matters. And we involve local input and various state agency input in that process. So to sort of demonstrate that on the next page, this is a depiction of the State Water Plan Fund and the recommendations for FY 2021 and 22. Without going into the details, I just want to point out that there are 4 state agencies that get money from this fund. It is administered through the Kansas Water Office, but these, you have the Department of Health and Environment, Agriculture, the Water Office, and Wildlife, Parks, and Tourism. On the next slide, we've pulled out this Kansas Water Office chunk of that. So what our agency would get through the State Water Plan Fund, as recommended, is what you see on that. This does include, as Victoria was saying, the enhancements for fiscal year 2022. In the interest of time, I'm not going to dawdle. I will keep moving on. The next slide depicts our second primary program. Remember, there were those 4 boxes at the beginning. This is the one that was way far to the right. This is our water utility, the reservoir program. We contract with the federal government. People contract with us to provide their water supplies. Next slide, please. This is an important concept just in general. The details don't matter so much, but look at the cyclic nature of this. This is the water supply program. What this depicts is when entities pay for their use of the water out of the reservoirs, that money comes in well before the water office has to pay the federal government. So it may look at times like there's a big chunk of money sitting there, but it's spoken for. And by contract, we have to then pay that by contract. We're currently working to try to refinance some of this debt, which is very, very long-term. And currently, favorable interest rates may allow us to do just that and save some money. So with that, I appreciate your time. I hope I haven't gone on too long, and I'm happy to stand for questions.
Committee, any questions? I have a couple. You know, would your department, or who would be the group that would be setting the new floodplains? You know, like when you get your property or whatever, it'll show whether you're in a floodplain or not. And I've had some people in my neck of the woods where they built a house in '75, it wasn't in a floodplain, and they get a letter lately, and basically says if your house was just 50% or more destroyed, you're not going to rebuild there. So, I mean, I've kind of watched that and got the calls. So, what would be changing that? So, I mean, it's drastically, the maps look a lot different in 25 or 30 years.
Thank you for that question, and that definitely does impact people's lives in a very significant way. And I would have to punt that question possibly to Assistant Director Kara Hendricks.
She looked pretty comfortable over there.
Kara Hendricks with the Kansas Water Office. That actually happens, the floodplain mapping happens under the Kansas Department of Agriculture Water Structures Program. So that would be a good question for them.
Same thing with watershed dams and whatever. Okay. Representative Gardner.
Sure. Thanks, Connie, for being here. You've been in this role now for how long?
About 6 weeks.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Earl Lewis flew the coop, huh? I have always been very supportive. A number of us on this committee has been try to be as supportive. We know how important water is as a resource to this state. And, I hope when we work this bill, we'll try to put some money in there. I don't know how long it'll stay, either from EDIF or SGF. I think it's we have a commitment of, if I remember correctly, $6 million from the state and $2 million from EDIF. And as you already pointed out, we have to go back to like 2009. It's really I believe it's one of our highest priorities in the state. But let me ask you a specific question about, I'm always really interested in the water technology farms, or, that really seems like a great project to get farms to partner with you, to learn new technologies to conserve water. And I think you did get a recommended enhancement of $100,000. Is that enough? How are you going to utilize that $100,000?
Well, the Water Tech Farm program, just to give a brief summary, if you don't mind, it's a program through the Water Office where we partner with farmers and producers and help provide the financial assistance for them to employ innovative techniques and tools to do what they do and use less water. And the idea is for them to be a demonstration so that they're actually following their livelihood and they're doing it in an economically positive, profitable way with these new techniques. And so it's showing other people how this can be done. So in short, that's what that program is for. So we do have to, as I said, help support the technologies that they have and support the education piece of that, try and get the word out. And we had been having events to encourage people to come and see them, which COVID sort of put the kibosh on for the year. But did you have anything to add, Kara? So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here. This is actually the second time now in a couple of days that I've actually had the opportunity to hear your presentation, because I was in the Water Committee also.
I apologize for the repeat.
No, that's fine. It makes me learn a little bit better. My same question, though, is I'm looking at the budget, and the Arbuckle study, I see it drops to nothing. The water injection drops down to barely nothing. Are these two projects, is the Arbuckle study finished? That we don't have reports yet on, or where do we stand with that?
Well, I'm actually really glad that you asked. In my prior role, before becoming director, I was chair of the Kansas Water Authority, so I was involved in the discussions and choices made for these. And the Arbuckle study and the water injection dredging are really important priorities. The Water Authority did not back off on those. The funding, as I said, there's just never enough money to go around. And sometimes, for example, with the water injection dredging, you need so much or enough of a commitment over time to really make something happen. That's a big, expensive pilot project. And so when we're faced with, and I say we in the former sense, the Water Authority, we were looking at, this was in October. We knew we were going to be facing cuts. We didn't even know how much money we were going to have to finish out the year. We were told to expect the worst for what was ahead. So that was the context in which these decisions were made. The Arbuckle study is ongoing. And a year ago, $68,000 was put into that to initiate the study, because in order to address this deep injection issue, the Kansas Geological Survey informed us that they needed to know more, that they know enough that this can be a really serious problem and we have to get on top of it quickly, but we need more data to really do that right. So the governor convened a study group, which is facilitated by our office, and they initiated a study that is currently beginning. And in fact, there was a meeting yesterday morning about that to identify the techniques for getting that data, identify the wells, how is that going to be done. The idea is it is moving forward, and it would be really important for there to be additions to that to allow that continue to move forward.
Thank you. Well, with the injection wells, even in our area, we have pumped a lot of salt water down into the Arbuckle. And I know we don't know what the problems are that we've created over the years. But in the water injection dredging, either one of these programs, I just hate to see things stopped, if we
I couldn't agree more.
possibly make these two projects go
Right.
forward. So,
I couldn't agree more.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Representative Baker?
Yeah, just a real quick comment. We took the Kansas Geological Tour of Northeast Kansas here a couple of years ago. Outstanding, and maybe you could get some information that we were shared on that tour for the committee. One of the things we saw was the big ditch that goes from St. Joe to Utica, Kansas. I know it really doesn't exist anymore, but I saw it on the map, and I know my friends out in Hayes would really like to see that come to fruition, and water is very important. So, but that was a great tour. Thank you.
Representative Gardner, or who? Oh, Representative Hahn?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much for your presentation. Quick question. On one of your slides, the public water supply program, you have a map, and I think you had said that we contract water with others and others with us. Did you mean in-state or out-of-state? Are we shipping water out of state?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so this is just in-state. The other question then I had is, you're right about the Ogallala Aquifer out in western Kansas. So is there a plan as to have some, what's our plan with that, with the depletion of the aquifer out there? Or was it not the?
Thank you for the question. I'm looking at the clock because I wish I had about 2 hours to go through that. In short, some of the projects that we're trying to do, everything is about reducing the level of groundwater use, trying to extend the life of the aquifer. So for example, our water tech farms that I described, the whole purpose of that is to try and encourage people to adopt practices that will use less water while making the same or more money than they are now to keep the productivity and the profitability good. And we have a monitoring well network that we are involved with KGS to keep an eye and keep data and really know what's happening as best we can. There are a number of initiatives, some of which are cost share, some of which are other things that we do to spread the word and encourage, and I would love to develop as much financial assistance as possible to help people switch to these kinds of practices. Because in short, I mean, there's just no way around it. To extend the life of the aquifer, we have to use less groundwater.
So as a follow-up, Mr. Chair, if I may, so do you have programs then that you're going and talking to these farmers and saying, hey, here's the programs available? I know that we have some funds set aside for these technology farms. How are you getting your producers on board?
There are a number of initiatives, and other state agencies are involved in this as well. The conservation districts are all out there trying to help spread the word about this. But we have Water Tech Expo that we put on every year trying to share. We didn't this year because of COVID, but in quick, Kara, would you like to suggest other things? I know we have a number of groundwater initiatives.
All of the things that Director Owen mentioned, as well as with the water tech farms, we also have field days where the producers as well as the folks that build the equipment are out there talking to the farmers about how to use it. And so that's been very effective at spreading that word. We work with those water tech farms. We actually have a Northwest Tech is a education program for young farmers. They participate in that as well. So it's really that education and outreach piece of what we do really out west. We also have, our office has a Western planner out west based in Garden City to be closer to that area to connect with those folks.
So we had incentivized with these wind farms for some of these producers. Is there any incentive to do, any tax incentive to do anything with these farmers to decrease their water use? No?
The tax incentives we really don't get involved with our agency. We're not in partnership with the Department of Revenue. So I'm sorry.
Representative Newland.
Just a quick comment on top of that then, all this. we rely on our farm organizations a tremendous amount for a lot of these studies and all, and a lot of the education and all with our producers and all, informing these racks and all that you were talking about. But the work with these water management farms too, and all, the farm organizations have a lot to do with that. And all. So I'll just put a plug in.
Well,
for
thank
those
you.
and all.
Thank you. I
So-
should have mentioned the racks because there are on average 10 or 12 people in each one of those 14 different areas. And they're supposed to be bringing what's going on locally and the concerns and issues that they have there. And so that there is a natural conduit for that information to come through the system for us. Yeah.
Representative
I'm
Gardner.
going to ask a real quick question, Mr. Chairman. Connie, what would you rather see? Would you rather see the enhancement on the the overall SGF from $4 to $6 million, the 500, the increase in EDIF, or would you rather at this point in time see some of those enhancements being funded? Just
Which enhancements?
Oh, well, like the Arbuckle, like the dredging, Tuttle. I mean, from your standpoint, what is the highest priority that will help you?
Well, I need to be respectful of the Kansas Water Authority that did the official recommendations for the State Water Plan Fund. And I need to be respectful of the governor's recommendations. And so not speaking for them, but speaking for me, I would love to see the Arbuckle and the WID move forward. I would love to see those two programs. Not that I don't want the others to, but if there could be additional enhancements, that's where I would put them.
Committee, any more questions? Connie and Kara, thank you very much. A great presentation.
Thank you for having us.
If there's no more questions, we're going to close the hearing on the Kansas Water Office Board, and without anything else, we're adjourned.